Afternoon, Matt.
Hey Graham, nice to see you.
Good to see you. This is the Crazy in Love podcast where two psychotherapists talk about modern relationships. Matt, often in these conversations, we talk about the cultural cliche of the perfect relationship, right?
Yeah.
The one where your partner completes you, the one where they match all of your physical and emotional needs. And we challenge that story quite a lot in these
Yeah,
conversations and in our writing. Today, we wanted to talk a little bit more about imperfection in relationships, right? And how that can manifest itself in positive ways, and maybe how to reframe some of the
yeah,
things that people see as problems in their relationships that we might actually, in
yeah,
our roles as couples therapists, actually try and encourage them to think of in slightly more positive or work with in
yeah,
slightly positive ways. What's
yeah, yeah,
what's
yeah,
your way
definitely.
into this
Yeah,
sort
yeah. So I think in very positive ways, imperfection is the deal, isn't it? You're not going to eliminate it anyway. But it's everywhere, I think. So we're thinking of some examples, aren't we? Sports is maybe the one that we go to quite often. So relationships are not like surgery. They're not like concert recital, then they're not about perfection or the elimination of anything going wrong. They're much more like contact sport or competitive sport or sport in a high pressure environment. So quite recently, I think Roger Federer's commencement address did the rounds, and he says something like he's missed 46% of the shots he's taken during his career. So basically just over half of the shots go in.
yeah, similar to baseball players, right? They're at the elite level of the major leagues. I played a bit of baseball myself, not very well, but I know that if you're hitting 300, that's a relatively good season. So that's 3 out of every 10 turns at bat you're getting a hit. That means 7 out of 10 you're failing. That's on a daily basis. Failing 7 out of 10 times, you're being paid quite significant amounts of money to do.
Yeah. Yeah, the classic example maybe from American sports would be MJ, wouldn't it? Michael Jordan does his
Yeah, I'm glad you
Nike.
didn't say Michael Jackson. Yeah,
uh, Michael Jordan does his commercial for Nike and says, I think from memory, he's missed 9,000
yeah,
shots during his
yeah.
career, and that was like they shot that commercial, I think, about 6 years out from his eventual retirement. So I think there were thousands more shots missed. Generally regarded as the GOAT, the greatest of all time in that sport. Roger Federer, I think, is a great example because he's such an elegant, natural
Mm,
tennis player. Just it seems to just flow from him. He's built for that sport. It's such a interesting kind of example of grace and athleticism and everything that often people enjoy about tennis, but still tons and tons and tons of mistakes. Similar to the example you were giving. So there's that sort of baked in from the get-go. I guess if you were progressing that idea, you'd be talking about that notion of anti-fragile as well. So it's kind of a broader concept than relationships. I think the originator of that term doesn't particularly relate it to relationships, but anti-fragile basically means not just that you can resist stuff or that you're resilient to pressure and stress, but that you grow from it, that it's necessary, that it's an inherent part of what it means to be human. It's really sort of, for my money, it's an idea around that brings sort of adaptation to life, that kind of, that in evolutionary terms, our main advantage is that we can
mm,
adapt. So the example that's sometimes given to illustrate the concept is something like bones and muscles need stress and need impact to grow, and in their absence, they don't just stay still; they actually reduce and constrict, and that's a fatal problem. It's not just we can cope with stress, or a little bit of stress is good for us every now and then. It's like that's built into the organism. It's necessary for our thriving as a species, and it's necessary for many, many other things besides. So the author of that idea would identify like other systems and things in the natural world that would benefit from the idea of being anti-fragile, that there's a kind of notion that we're very delicate, that we're made of spun glass, that everything's got to be safe and harmonious and peaceful and easy, and that's one, not the reality, and two, not to your benefit. Does that make sense?
Makes a lot of sense. I like the focus on growth rather than just survival. So I think a lot of people would resonate with the idea that a lot of structures, including relationships, need to absorb stress. So the idea of kind of a bridge, right? You build a bridge to absorb certain stresses.
Yeah,
You build in a bit of flexibility in the structure to absorb stress, but you don't necessarily grow from it. But I think the point that you're
yeah.
really bringing out and developing there is the idea that it's essential for growth, not just survival.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So lots of advice to turn the stress down and to minimize it or try and eliminate it. And that this idea is really the opposite of that, that it's for our benefit. So bones need impact to grow stronger. You gain bone density as well as muscle mass by those impacts and pressures. So that's not jumping from the 20th floor. That's way too much stress. But there is a repetitive need for impact and challenge in those kind of areas.
Yeah, it makes me think of a couple of things. One is around evidence. So we used to think, for example, that jogging was quite bad for our knees. I think modern science suggests that uh, if you do it in the right way, particularly, and do it within certain limits, it's really quite good for you in the same way that lifting weights is good in that sense
Yes,
of strain
yes, yeah,
and stretch and creating tension and
yeah,
repair within the muscles.
yeah.
Bringing that into relationships, the evidence suggests that a bit of stress and strain is good for us, right? That even if we live with someone who is creating conflict and a bit of stress with us in the relationship, as long as we perceive that person to be quite authentic in the relationship, it tends to lead to better relationship outcomes. Now, there's something there about perceived authenticity and what that actually means in the context of a relationship, but it does suggest that we want and need a bit of tension and conflict in our relationships. We're not just talking about this in a theoretical way. And I think that's true of our clients we see, isn't it? That they'd rather have the conversation, even if the conversation is difficult,
Yeah.
than live with someone who's constantly telling them everything's fine when under the surface it really isn't.
Yeah, it's a slightly allied point, but I think it could get boring in long-term relationships as well. So I think there is something about bringing the things that you want and that interest you that may become some of a challenge, something of a challenge to your partner, and vice versa. Allowing yourself to be challenged by those new ideas. Somebody who's, I don't know, developing something new about themselves or moving their career on in a way that comes as a challenge for the family or for the dynamic within the relationship, that those things also are good for us. That if it's too comfy, too cozy, too samey, what you hear behind closed doors is often that the relationship is boring.
Mm,
It's
mm,
become repetitive, that there isn't enough to push against or there isn't enough kind of challenge there. And that is some of what we like at first, isn't it? Not quite the chase, but just getting to know that person, working out that person, like seeing how they fit into your life. How do they fit into your friendship circle? How do you organize your life around them? You absorb some of their pursuits and interests. And that, I think, is generally for our good. And often people stop bringing a degree of challenge to the relationship, because I think we are sold on harmony. We get that message a lot, don't we? Like, don't ask for too much, turn it down, sort of happy wife, happy life. I'm not completely opposed to that advice on another day, but endlessly seeking a compromise does sometimes mean two people are unhappy. Turn taking can be a more vibrant way of
mm,
thinking about trading and trade-off.
mm. Yes, I like that idea of relationships potentially becoming a bit boring and a bit stale if they are samey.
Yeah,
W- what would you say to those people though that do want something that is a bit more, I guess, romantic in the classic sense than what we're talking about here? We tend to try and bring a more, I guess, objectively realistic
yeah,
theme to some of these conversations.
yeah, yeah,
But there is a romantic ideal that someone will improve our lives and kind of almost make up for our own imperfections. And I think what we're doing in this conversation elsewhere is trying to challenge that idea that a relationship should almost kind of patch
yeah,
over your imperfection.
yeah, yeah,
I think it's more a model of learning to live and almost show gratitude for and appreciation of each other's imperfections. And by doing so, that helps you with your own self-esteem to regard your own imperfections with a slightly more positive light, potentially.
Yeah. I think that makes sense. It was just sort of triggering another thought in me, which I think is linked, maybe not such a direct answer to your question or observation, but there is something about adventure and newness, isn't there? Like those things are romantic, they are exciting. I think they do push you into another area. So it's a bit like being happy. You usually get to be happy by doing something else. It's usually a byproduct rather than, if you go at it more directly, it sort of vanishes, peeling an onion. There is no core, there's nothing there, you don't find anything. It's sort of en route to something else. And I tend to think about that as being kind of similar to romance. It's via doing something fun or silly or new or I don't know, unexpected, something that catches you by surprise or challenges you a bit to see your partner in a new way or to see life in a new way or, to see your togetherness in a new way. Going out to do something romantic, it's sort of like, I'm like, oh, what would that be? It's going to be like, we're going to end up going away to the Soho farmhouse, aren't we? Or we're going to end up having a 3-course dinner. Nothing wrong with those two things, but like too much of that, it's just dull, isn't it? It's like if the weather's good, right? Maybe it's a picnic, maybe it's a bike ride, maybe it's just something you've never done together, maybe it's the other one embracing, the hobby or the interests of the, of their
Yeah,
partner.
let's almost kind of take a step back. What do we, when we talk about imperfections in relationships, what are we actually talking about? Are we talking about personality differences? Are we talking about conflict? Are we talking
Yeah,
about just
yeah.
sameness? I mean, it's kind of hard to
Yeah,
pin down, isn't it?
it's an interesting
I
thing, yeah.
guess what's in my mind is that you might enter a relationship thinking about your own emotional and physical needs and think that they need to be met. So it's almost like this modern idea of never having any tension in your life, but
Yeah.
never having any sense of striving for more because it's
Mm.
already there. It's already being prepared for you on a plate in front of you.
Yeah. No, I think that's a good observation. I don't know what the imperfections are. They're almost not imperfections when you get right down to it, are they? They're just I don't know, it's just being human or being different from the other person. I think is what we're talking about, and I guess that's my beef with it. Really, that sort of talk that you could down regulate that. So we'll always be different, won't we? You and I will always be different. We'll always see things somewhat differently. True in relationships. True in friendships. It was making me think of first time I took my boy to watch Tottenham play, and 60,000 people descending on a relatively modern and swish stadium, but you've still got 60,000 people all trying to get to a limited set of toilets, a limited bar, buy food, arriving broadly at the same time within an hour or so, and then exiting at the same time. And I was sort of trying to prepare him for that, and that's almost impossible. But like that was the first time he'd really been in a crowd of that size, and they've got quite fun signs up at Tottenham that say "Observe the brush by," which just means for anyone who doesn't know sports stadiums, you are going to brush by people. People are going to knock you. If you're carrying a drink, it's going to get knocked. You're going to knock someone else's drink. And what observe the brush by means is we are all on the same side, apart from the small section of 3,000 or so away supporters. We're all there for the same purpose, doing the same thing, and like observing the brush by is a really sensible thing to do. It wasn't intended, but it is going to happen. It's not really a mistake or an imperfection. It's built into 60,000 people being in one place, isn't it? I think relationships are like that. You are going to have different standards of cleanliness, different ideas about when the dishes should be done immediately after the meal, or you sit down and relax with your show and then you do it at the end, or do you leave them, God forbid, you leave them till the following day? Those sorts of things. How do we spend money? Are we big savers, or do we think life's too short? Where do we want to go on holiday? What do we do when we go there?
Yeah, and those brush by issues, the personality differences, differences of principles, whatever we want to deem them, quite different from fundamental imperfections in a relationship. Treating each other in particularly bad ways, disregarding
Yeah.
selfishness, wanting fundamentally different things from life, those kind of things.
Yeah, absolutely. I suppose if you're thinking about like what you and I do when we meet with couples or we meet with individuals who are concerned with their relationship, we're sometimes encouraging people to do different things, speak to one another in a different way, put the other person's needs before theirs, speak up for their own wants and preferences if they're not doing that enough. And there's something about learning a new language. I often go to that as sort of analogy. If you've not seen great models of relationships, you know, in your own upbringing, and you've not had terrific relationships prior to this one, then you are learning something of a new language. And that would be a sort of classic example where mistakes are baked into the model. They're a feature, not a bug. You know, children learning language, or you and I learning conversational Spanish, assuming you don't speak any conversational Spanish, is a bit messy, isn't it? The
No
piano.
problem at all.
um, anything you care to think of, really, the model requires that you make mistakes along the way, and you get better by increments and over time. And if you stuck with that language example, that would open up menus.
Mm.
It would open up, you know, sampling cultural life, but in due course it might open up friendships in that country and employment opportunities. It would radically transform like how you experience that country. But at first it would be crappy and clunky, and you feel like you were never ever going to get there.
I think what I notice in some of the metaphors or the examples you use is that often there's a lot of practice involved and a lot of mistakes along the way, but you're usually working towards one way of doing something. There is an end goal in sight, right? MJ needs to put the ball in the basket.
Yeah.
Roger Federer needs to hit a forehand. There's only so many ways that you can
Yeah.
hit a forehand over the net, right? There's an end goal that you're practicing towards, and that practice is
Yeah.
getting towards the right phraseology in a Spanish sentence, right? So that you're
Yeah.
understood. In a relationship, it's a bit different, right? It's a bit
Yeah.
different to
Yeah.
that. You're not working towards an obvious end goal. In some ways, that makes it harder, that you're trying to find your own language. So rather than you learning your partner's language, you're actually creating something new between the two of you that is some sort of messy amalgam of the different things that your histories, relationships, personalities that you're bringing into it together.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a good observation. You're drawing out the limits of the
Your analogy.
of
Yeah.
the analogy. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. No, not in any way, shape, or form to push back on that, because I think it is, you know, it's analogous insofar as it's analogous and no further. But the interesting example of Federer, for anyone who cares about tennis, is he is a very rare example of someone hitting a one-handed backhand. Like in that era of tennis, most people are hitting that two-handed, and in most tennis academies, you would hit the backhand two-handed. So, you know, there's a bunch of kids around the country being taught a two-handed backhand, you know. So there's something there for us, isn't it? You can do this in different ways. You know, you can have a different kind of armory of shots, or a different.
Yeah, I think where I'm going with that is that it's the classic. It's okay to argue in relation. Some couples are going to argue a lot more than others, and arguing
Yeah.
frequently is not a signal of a bad relationship. It's not a signal of an imperfection. It's
Yeah.
a signal that you're
Yeah.
you're working through personality differences and preferences, and hopefully you're doing that in a respectful way and making up afterwards. But it's
Yeah.
not a sign that you need to break up.
No, no, absolutely. No, it's a good example, isn't it? We sort of the process to get there, the manner in which you get there, your thought processes might be different from mine. The importance of, you know, recycling or spending time with family and friends, you know, those things have got to be negotiated, haven't they? Whether you're a spender or a saver, you know, whether you want to, it's your deeply held political view that you send your children to the local school, or you've absolutely always wanted for them to go to the fee-paying school that you yourself went to, whatever it might be. All of that stuff has got to be in the mix, right? That's got to be traded off. That's
Yeah.
got to be talked about. And I think when people swallow that, give in too readily, you end up in trouble. And when you put your foot down and don't listen to your partner's point of view, you end up in trouble as well. There isn't one way to play the backhand, right?
Yeah,
Are agreed that a good educational outcome is what we want for the school. What I'm often saying to couples is, you're on the same page, you want the same thing, the value is the same. How you get there, you know, is going to be different. Like that bit's got to be talked about. That's got to be understood from the other person's perspective. And probably starting with good intentions would be a helpful way to do this. They are not there to make your life more painful or to deliberately confound the thing you're asking for. Or like, we can talk about this, we can genuinely disagree, and you can have really strong views on a thing.
Makes me think of the Miles Davis quote I really like. You might know it, about it's not playing the wrong note that's the problem. It's the one after that determines whether it's a mistake or not. Right? You can
Oh,
play
yeah, yeah.
stuff note, but particularly in jazz, if you play, I don't like jazz myself. So it's not my thing, but as I understand it, if you play a dodgy note, but an off
Yeah,
note, it's the one after that
yeah,
kind
yeah,
of picks it up and makes it musically interesting. What I like about that is two things really. One is that it reminds us that creativity relies on mistakes,
yep.
but it also kind of suggests that you'd know if it musically a phrase of music of Miles Davis playing didn't work. You'd know if he played 10, 20 shitty notes in a row, right?
Yeah,
That wouldn't be music. That would be discordant nonsense. But he
yeah,
can play three or four, but as long as he kind of finds his way back to some sort of
yeah,
medium that we all kind of
yeah,
recognize within us, then it becomes creative music. And I think that there's something in there that you can apply to relationships, right? You're not working for the perfect model of a conversation, but there's obviously a kind of basic grammar of being in a relationship that I think we would often articulate to our clients, that there is a kind of baseline of respect and the way in which you should be treating each other and working through these conversations, that it is a kind of prescription for a good relationship, even if it can be imperfect.
yeah. I agree. I mean, there are some ground rules, aren't there? I mean, there's no point shying away from that. There's some really obvious ones. But the ones that are articulated by the Gottmans, for example, just that within an argument, we won't be endlessly critical of one another. We won't. We will retire any desire that we have to get into a character assassination. You
Yeah.
always do this. You never do that. Those kind of big categorical statements, or that we would just zone out, or that we would like cough out the room and not continue the argument. Might be wise to call time. Might be wise to press pause, but in that situation, you would say, look, I don't think we're getting anywhere. I'm going to need to get some fresh air. We can come back to this in 20 minutes or so if you're still in the market for it. That would be different from storming out or sulking off or going and quietly seething somewhere. So I think there are some ground rules. Like, we don't just walk out on our partner in those moments. We don't threaten separation or divorce. We stick with it, and we recognize that this is hard and your partner is driving you absolutely nuts in this moment in time, and you're baffled by why they can't see your point of view. But all of that can be said, it can be spoken about without, I'm going to blow the relationship up, or, the issuing of a ultimatum.
Yeah, I like a lot of that. Well, what do you make about the public displays of imperfection and our lack of kind of comfort in that? It's almost like I can imagine a lot of people listening to this conversation kind of nodding along and thinking, yeah, that makes sense to me privately. But we all
Mm.
seem to be quite nervous about showing other people the
Yeah,
imperfections of our relationship.
yeah,
And
yeah,
there's
yeah.
something here about us trying to normalize some of
Yeah.
that.
We say that
But
about, I think this is your point you make about couples therapy, that a certain type of person now is really quite at ease with therapy, and certainly like younger generation, much more comfortable, would have it almost as a badge of honor. We talk about it freely in friendships, but very few couples
yeah,
would do the same or be as open about the fact that they've had couples therapy or they sought couples therapy. It feels.
it's I'm thinking as well about just having people over or going around to other people's houses and just thinking,
Yeah,
I don't mind having a little bit of conflict with my wife in those situations, just a
yeah,
little bit of kind of like we would speak to each other at home, but I can feel her kind of iciness coming my way, as if to say, like, don't do
yeah,
this in public, don't do this in
yeah,
public. But I think
yeah,
it's understandable in some way, but I think
yeah,
it would be healthier for us to show a little bit more imperfection and
yeah,
a
yeah.
bit more of the challenges that we all face where around other people.
It's making me think of the thing that a lot of couples say to me, which they try and not have arguments in front of the children, and they make a virtue of that. And maybe they've even seen that in their own upbringing, that there was a virtue made of that. And for me, it's the
Yes.
absolute opposite, right?
Yeah.
It's, oh, that's a real pity. We're onto something important here. You've not seen how two adults who love one another resolve conflict, and how, when they're irritating one another and failing to see the other person's point of view, they switch, they change gear, they trade off, they resolve that, they look at the greater good, they come back in touch with their values or whatever else, and the one person says sorry or retires their insanely rigid preference for X, Y, and Z. Like, that's a real pity. And if you're not showing that to your children, it's a deficit. Like, you're making you're making some mistake in that. Like, it's fine for everyone to see that, and it's basically a falsehood, isn't it, to not do that in front of the kids. Why on earth not, right? Do you think your kids don't notice anyway?
Yeah,
They don't.
I think people are thinking something different, but it's manifesting in the incorrect way. So they're thinking, I don't want my kids to see us be mean to each other. I don't want my kids to ever see
Yeah,
us raising our voices and being harsh with each other. But then they're mistaking that as, we need to keep them away from all of our disagreements. We need to keep them away from emotions as well,
yeah,
heated
yeah,
emotions. Whereas I'm with you 100% that hiding children away from us trying to practice the skill of dealing with those big feelings
yeah,
amongst each other feels like a disservice to them. That's part of our job, is to help them understand how adults do this so that they're ready when their time comes. It is difficult. Like, my 12-year-old hates it when things get heated. She comes in,
yeah.
she'll say, even when, like, slight nuance in our voices at home, she'll come in and, like, you're arguing again. I hate it when you argue. We're not arguing. Chill out.
Yeah. No,
You'll know if we're actually arguing.
yeah. It's for me, the full circle on that would be the anti-fragile point. Like, we're not anti-fragile, and your 12-year-old isn't anti-fragile, and that will be, greatly to her benefit in years to come. Because if she is confronted with aggression or somebody being unkind or cruel, she'll be like, oh no, this is not how it goes.
Yes.
This is well beyond it. I know the thing, I know it in my bones, and this is different from that, and this represents risk, or it represents the point at which I would want to exit from this conversation and or this relationship. Whereas if she's not seen it, it's like, well, maybe it is like this, maybe this is what they were doing, or maybe I think you'd be more baffled by that. You would have had no apprenticeship and no way of understanding it.
Yeah, I like that. I think that's something that people can take away from this conversation. They might want to question themselves about at home. That's
Yeah,
really helpful.
yeah. Is that our sign off, or is there a bit more to say?
I don't have that much to say. I think the only area of life that I was thinking about before this conversation that we haven't talked about, but I don't think we need to, is around kind of aesthetic appreciation of imperfection. That
Yeah,
there's just something just quite often considered quite beautiful about imperfection.
yes. Yeah, that's good. That's good. Let's do 2 minutes on that, because I think that's worth it, isn't it? I was thinking of one highbrow example and one kind of lowbrow example, because football must always be considered as low.
Yeah, yeah.
The football example is that you have great spells of play, and it drives me nuts when I hear commentators like going on about, like, one team is dominating the other or is about to sweep them away, and it's almost, that's very rare for that to be the case, that a team can keep focus and keep concentration for like 90 minutes of play. And it's like, no, they're having a spell, aren't they? And maybe the other team is sat back absorbing that, but over the course of that match, like,
Maybe it'll revert to the mean pretty quickly.
yeah, exactly. And over the course of the season, so like one game, it really means nothing. There isn't a team in the world that hasn't beaten another team by sort of 3-0 at some point in the recent history. It can happen all the time. So there's something about, okay, so we go again in football terms, or in sort of like addiction recovery terms, we do the next right thing, which is probably back on the training ground in that instance. But if we've been sharp with our partner, or we've been unkind, or we've dug in, it's like, you can apologize for that. It's not the end of the world. You don't have to wait till the next therapy session. You don't necessarily need to book into couples therapy. You can just say, I've been an idiot. I was well over the top on that. Like, that, what I said wasn't fair, and you can recalibrate that. You can reset it.
Good. You said you had one highbrow example, one lowbrow example.
The highbrow example was the sort of imperfection of someone like Maria Callas. So her voice is generally taken to be unsteady at certain points. Not the most. Maybe a little bit harsh in places. So there's almost a flaw built in, but that's the humanity of it. That's the bit that
You
people.
think about Maria Callas, I think about Tom Waits. That's the difference between the two of
Yeah,
us.
right. It's a great example, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It sounds like he smoked a dozen and had a few shots of Seagrams before he's gone on
Yeah.
the.
Yeah. And even same with like Bob Dylan, right?
Yeah,
Same,
yeah.
same, and same with Bruce probably as well, right?
A little bit, but yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, there's a gravelly note or a slight imperfection there, and certainly in live performances, right? It's why people like bootlegs as well of music. I know we're going on a bit of a
Yeah.
tangent here, and we should probably wrap it up, but
Yeah.
that idea of you're interested in the individual nuances. It is a bit of a relationship with a music artist. If you're going down that
Yeah.
level of kind of, okay, I want that night in Pittsburgh as opposed to the third night in Pittsburgh because this is the night where he plays that song, and I want to hear this perspective on it.
Yeah.
But if
Yeah.
it's just the same as the perfect studio recording, you'd be like, well, what's the bloody point of that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah, no, very true. Yeah, it's a nice example to sign off on, maybe.
Not sure what the analogies are to relationships, but we'll. I'm
Yeah,
sure well, there's something there.
yeah, yeah. But there's richness, isn't there? Like it comes and it goes. It's different at certain points. You're not looking for. Sometimes when I'm talking to couples about how to frame things, how to phrase them, what kind of choices they might use about how to articulate what they want. I think sometimes I just want to make sure they're not getting caught up on the words
Oh,
or.
I 100% agree. 100% agree. And I'm sure some of that is based on anxiety, right? It's a procrastination device to go, okay, I need to get this perfect. I
Mm,
think there's some genuine element of I need to nail the words. And I often say to people, the
yeah,
intent and motive matters far more. Like if you're with the right partner that's going to allow you to screw up your words and to have another go and
yeah,
is going to give you the space to do that, the intent and motive matters so much more than the specific words you use.
yeah. I agree. That's where we end.
Good. See you soon.
Yeah, nice one. Take care.
Bye.